Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Matthew Struck with the Agents and Brokers Interest Group. We're here coming at you again with another one of our agent and broker profiles. We are lucky enough to be joined by Derek. Derek, how's it going?
Good. It's going
Yeah.
really good.
Awesome, awesome. And just remind me, where is home for you right now?
Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Okay. I'm glad you're another East Coast guy, so I didn't have to worry that I'm getting you up too early to do this interview or anything like that. For anyone who's watching this, I would implore you. We're doing some more of these, so please hit the like button, subscribe, hit that little bell so you get the notification when these things go up. There are also written versions of these profiles and these interviews on the Agents and Brokers Interest Group website that I will put in the links below. So really quickly, Derek, just to kind of give some folks your background and who you are, what do you do and who do you work for right now?
I work for reThought Insurance. I'm the director of commercial underwriting. So make sure our programs are managed, that we're using our capacity right, following the guidelines, and helping the agents we work with to book business for them.
Awesome.
What we do is private flood. So that's historically been the government. Of course, there are billions of dollars in debt, and there are lots of issues with FEMA. So
Yep.
we're filling that gap, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger industry. And yeah, I was a retail commercial agent. I moved over really because I joined the industry to help people. And when I saw how things went in our country for flood insurance, it seemed like a great opportunity to help people.
Yep.
Because when there's major flood, most people have no coverage. And I don't know about you, but if I have a mortgage and no house, that's a big problem.
Yep.
Alone a business folding and all the employees having nowhere to work. So looking for a solution to help with that.
Yeah, I can appreciate that because as a retail broker myself, having someone to help who's like a subject matter expert with flood is really important because I don't think people really truly understand, especially if you're not in the industry, they don't really understand the complexities of what happens on the back end. And everyone thinks, flood insurance is flood insurance, and it couldn't be further from the truth, right? So, all right, cool. How long have you been with reThought?
It was January last year, so
Oh,
about a year.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, in terms of like the challenges that come with your job, I mean, you're basically working with agents and brokers. Is that your biggest challenge?
No, I love working with agents and brokers. There is some education on flood because it's often an afterthought, or hey, we're about to finish this account out, but we forgot the flood,
Right.
or it's a challenge just to find it.
Yep.
So having people with a good grasp of insurance is definitely a different way of dealing with people because it used to always be business owners, and a lot of them is kind of education from the ground up.
Yep.
Even if they've been in business for a long time, they've had a program. A lot of people haven't stopped and actually explained what that coverage is, how it works, and why they have what they have. They just tell them this is what you need, and people buy it.
Yep.
So it's actually pretty nice working with people that already have a pretty good base with what's going on.
Okay. So what is it? Is it mostly maybe the regulatory environment that you guys fight with, or what's kind of like what's kind of your more often not the pain in your rear end, so to speak?
So I'd say the two biggest pains are, one, making sure there's plenty of capacity,
Mm-hmm.
and two, handling the business that comes in. Just because there's not a lot of people that do what we do. There's very, very few, and it's a hard market right now. So a lot of people are getting increases from programs have stopped operating as
Right.
well.
Right.
So handling the business that comes in. So our goal is definitely to be a technology forward company, which is something different for the industry. And so we're putting in place more technology all the time to help handle that load, but just trying not to turn stuff away.
Yeah. That's good to hear. I think I try not to get political too much on these, and this isn't going to be any different. I'm not going to make any big political sweeping statements, but the federal flood program it's definitely not technology first, right? I mean, it takes a long time usually to get answers back. I can say from personal experience, having worked with you on something that I came to you that was kind of like a last minute must kind of work on thing. I never could have done that with the NFIP and gotten solid answers. I might have been able to get a number back, but I don't know if I would have been able to get solid answers for the questions that I had. So I definitely appreciate that. In terms of the tech, is a lot of it. I think a lot of it's more so on the back end for you guys, right? Like
Yeah.
in the rating and kind of the identifying the risk piece of it.
Yeah, yeah. Right now, I mean, one of the big issues historically, and one of the reasons that I think FEMA is so much in debt, other than the fact that they're not allowed to be rate neutral
Mm-hmm.
uh, because of what Congress has done, is that they really don't understand a lot of the risks they work on. There's not enough information there. When you're talking about fire, for the most part, if you get a few basic characteristics, most buildings are relatively the same.
Right.
If you figure out what general area it's in, what zip code, you have a pretty good idea what's going on. Whereas with flood, you can be totally fine. Your neighbor can be underwater.
Yep.
So yeah, a whole lot of our technology, what we've done so far has been focused on understanding the risk and underwriting and placing things correctly to both provide the right coverage to our agents and their customers, as well as to protect our capacity providers, because that's what makes sure that we're not going to fold, that they're happy, and that we can place more business.
Right. Right.
What we're going to be moving into is more of that front end, where it lets us push things through quicker and reach a broader base of people.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I love the fact that you kind of brought up to what you were talking about in terms of being able to classify a risk and two homes being relatively close to each other and the risk profile not necessarily being exactly the same, whereas the flood rate maps might rate them exactly the same, right? So one of the things that came out, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on the statistic, but I think Hurricane Harvey is one of the last kind of like publicly massive flooding events that we had. And in Harvey, what was it? It was like 40% of all the homes that were flooded were actually in an X, or what people would know as a low risk zone, right?
Yeah, I think it was. I don't know what the percentage was. It was a good percentage, but I think the overall percentage is something like in the 20-some% range. Is in places that people consider not flood zones, just in
Mm-hmm.
general country. So that's not that's a little more of a high example there, but
Yeah.
it's not unreasonable. Everybody's in a flood zone. It's just how risky is it?
Yeah. I always find that funny. Like I don't write a lot of personal lines, but when I do come across it, and homeowners like, oh no, I'm not in a flood zone, and there's that re-education that has to take place. And you are in a flood zone. You may flood, but it might take 500 years. But everyone's technically in a flood zone. So yeah, that's always a fun conversation. All right, so we talked about kind of the trying part of your job. What's the most fun or the most rewarding that comes out of your day to day?
Getting to help people, like when they send something in and that's the key to an account. I was working with an agent the other day that was working on $1 million account. The flood portion was less than 150,000 of it, but without that you can't do the account. So when that comes in last minute and we need this, that portfolio was, I want to say about $130 million or something, and they needed it in a couple days. So the capacity they needed was only I think it was about 10 million, but that's still 10 million on 100 some million, and they need it in a couple days. There's we can call that can put that together.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's I'd say that's a huge value add, especially what's funny is and I think you mentioned it in kind of your written answers in your profile. But selling on price is like a cardinal sin of insurance. I mean, it's not a cardinal sin if you like operate a big company and want to write tons of policies, right? But as far as doing your professional duty, strictly selling on price is you're basically abdicating your professional responsibility, right? So the flood component of that, if someone's not having that conversation, or if they're not kind of pounding the pulpit, so to speak, about that, it's a big misstep. But I love hearing that there are accounts where the client or the ultimate insured is open to that conversation, right? That you're adding a piece to that puzzle that might not have been talked about in the past or might have been de-emphasized. And then you're the linchpin, right, for being able to get that account written. That's fantastic. You mentioned so the hard market aspect of things. Us being in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and things like that. Have you seen that lightning? Is it still hard market in terms of property and specifically flood? How has that dynamic been working out recently?
So specifically flood, it's continued to harden. So, you know, there's less capacity out there in general, and people are charging more for it.
Oh, wow. Okay. And is that strictly based off of losses? Is that what it is? It's the loss ratio associated with it?
I think there's some losses associated with it. A lot of that has to do with people misjudging flood or not understanding it and trying to take an approach on it, as
Okay.
opposed to actually events that have occurred necessarily.
Okay.
As well, I think it's a bit of a capacity play. Carriers that have thrown in some flood or played in flood need to, I think, pull out some money to cover their surplus and cover their other lines, make sure they don't get in trouble
Yep.
as payroll decreases, revenue decreases, auto usage decreases, all these things that bring premium down, but at the same time, they're still paying out losses that have already happened while business was rolling along full tilt.
Yep.
That means less money in the till, and they got to get it from somewhere. So easy thing to do is say, we've had some issues with cat exposures in the past. Let's pull some money out of there. Let's back that less and make sure that our core lines are supported.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I would imagine on a big renewal, floods 10% of the overall renewal, they can get rate, right? Like they can get a 5 or 10 point increase, and no one's going to bat too much of an eyelash at it because it's much more painful to get the 5 or 10% increase on the bigger lines in that portfolio than the flood. So that kind of makes sense. All right, so in terms of like working from home, like have you always been work from home? Have you always been mobile? And is reThought kind of open minded as far as work from home and having employees that are out in the field more often than not?
Yeah. So I did have work from home option while I was an agent. Obviously, most agents have that because it's a bit of freedom there.
Mm.
I did mostly work from the office because I didn't have a great set up office area at home. I just kind of used the kitchen table. When I moved to Reset, when I moved to reThought, Reset's one of the programs we do. When I moved to reThought, we're actually a distributed workforce already.
Okay.
So we're all over the country, and we actually work with people in other countries as well in some support roles.
Mhm.
So it was pretty much business as usual. The big change was my wife's a teacher, and I've got 2 young boys. So all of a sudden, everybody was home.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're pretty good. The thing is, they want to hang out and see daddy a lot, which
Yep.
is great. At the same time, when there's work to do, that can be tough. So that was probably the biggest adjustment. But now I've got my office space. I was all set up before the coronavirus hit, and keep rolling along.
That's pretty good. I've heard. I think there's a lot of fatalism because I think the headline numbers. I don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a difficult economic environment, and we're probably in the throes of recession, if not bordering on depressionary, at least in the interim kind of dynamic. But I've heard tons of people, specifically within the insurance industry, but also in a lot of other industries, where it's just been pretty much business as usual. It's been folks just kind of working from home, or even if they did have to adapt, I mean, they're being a little reactionary, but it's not really, kind of like ruining their work life, or not necessarily ruining their work life, but they can get the operations done. So that's a good piece there. I'm glad they're forward thinking. I mean, how much of the workforce for reThought is really kind of like mobile?
What do you mean by mobile?
Or well, like work from home, or given that kind of flexibility.
We're a distributed workforce. Everybody can work from home.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Okay, I now do you have like a physical location you can go into if you need to? I mean,
Yeah,
pandemic not considered.
yeah. We can use office space with one of the flex office space places when need be, and then we also have a set space in Denver area in Broomfield.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So a number of the questions that we're asking folks nowadays, and this is kind of a common conversation is, what does the future look like after this? Um, do you think reThought's model, or just kind of like in general, that distributed workforce model is going to become more prevalent?
Well, personally, what I think is the way a few banks and other people in the financial industry have gone is likely to be where insurance companies go, which is we got an office space. It's much smaller. We have, set monitors, everything set up. Everybody's got a mobile computer they can take, plug it into a docking station. Now you've got your monitors, your keyboard, whatever. And, have times where teams come in so that everybody stays in contact, but most of the time you're at home. That lets everybody be distributed. Everybody has their home internet. Everybody's comfortable working at home. They have their space.
Right.
If power goes out, if the internet goes out, if there's a natural disaster, you have a much more spread out workforce. You're spending a whole lot less money on overhead. As we know, a good portion of insurance premiums, probably larger than it could be, goes to just supporting our activities to, process, function, insurance claims, everything else.
Yeah.
So every bit we can knock down there helps us make money, keep money, and charge less money. So
that's an interesting point. So like long term, not to nerd out too much for anyone who's non-insurance who might be watching this, but one of the advantages of private flood is you can actually build in business interruption coverage into the flood policy, right? So long term, that might actually be a good trend in terms of getting claims down, at least on the business interruption piece for flood, right? So if you have, and the most recent thing I can draw a parallel to was Superstorm Sandy right here in the Northeast. We had a number of people that could work from home, and so those folks were still able to do their job and generate revenue. If more of the workforce is like that, a flooding event has a little bit less of an impact on the overall claims profile for flood going forward, right?
yeah, I'd say that there are a whole lot of industries out there that we work with that don't have that option, like manufacturing, warehouse, those kinds
That's
of
true.
things.
Yep.
Having distributed offices helps out. It probably helps a little bit less with flood, wildfire, sort of hurricanes, basically cat exposures, just for the reason that while a fire might destroy your office building you're used to working at, and then you have to figure out what you do. Distributed workforce is great for that. Everybody works from home. If it's a flood and we have something like Sandy coming through, a whole area might be wiped out. They might not have internet connection, power, whatever. So if you have a lot of people kind of even living in that area, flood that devastates New Orleans. If everybody lives in New Orleans and works in New Orleans, they'll have very few people that work. So
Okay.
I think it would help less on catastrophe lines just because they affect an entire area instead of more of a specific building or something of that nature.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, maybe it's me searching for searching for a silver lining. No, but that makes sense. I think BI losses. We're definitely going to have to rethink the business interruption coverage as a line item, just from the PR aspect of what's going on right now, because so much has come out from politicians wanting the industry to pay for those claims, and there's been a lot of pushback from the industry in terms of look, we didn't intend to cover this in the first place, and we never charged for it, so there's not really money there for us to pay for it. But I definitely think that BI is going to be reThought, ironically, reThought moving forward.
That's where the name comes from.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. So talk about the work from home a little bit. I think you and I share some personal trials and tribulations, I think, in terms of the home environment and getting work done. What are some of those for you?
I think pretty much the kids is the big thing. Other than that, work from home is a great thing. I'd say some people love it, some people hate it. So there's always going to be some people that resist it,
Right.
because there are people that if they're in an office, they focus, they work, they get things done. And there are people that are home and they're like, I really should go do the laundry. I
Yep.
can do that. The TV's right over there. I could turn that on while I work. So there are definitely potential distractions there.
Yep.
But it's great. there's less distractions for me. I was always the person that when I was in an office, I was always the person that answered questions.
Mm,
So I still do that a lot now, but it's a little less frequent with people not just stopping by every every few minutes to ask things.
yep.
So actually a little less distraction. It's nice if you have to have somebody come do something at your house, they can do it and you kind of let them do their thing as long as it's somebody you trust enough to do that.
Right. Yep.
Laundry can be a distraction, but then again, you can put it in, let it wash, and then when you take a second to walk around to look away from the screen, you can flip it in the dryer, and you know, yeah,
So,
there's some opportunities.
so did not that your life changed too much with the current situation, but when you went to reThought and you're now part of a distributed workforce, did your workday still pretty much stay kind of like 9 to 5 ish or whatever you viewed as a standard workday, or kind of did it change a little bit?
Well, I don't think I've ever had a 9 to 5 work day, but I don't
Yeah.
think most agents ever have.
Yeah.
But
Whenever I ask someone that, I get two responses. Usually, it's kind of like matter of fact, like, yeah, 9 to 5. I'm pretty much the same. And other people are say like, what, I have a part time job. Like, 9 to 5 is way less than some people choose to work.
yeah, no,
I
I
feel
only work half
opposite.
days, 12 hours. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
uh, Now, I intentionally tried to maintain pretty much the same schedule, which, I dealt with flood, but I definitely had a lot of catching up to do. So, that extra time outside office hours was mostly, getting a lot more familiar and in depth with flood. But
Okay.
yeah, I've tried to maintain pretty much the same hours since the kids have been home. I haven't been as good about that because normally it would be getting up really early and
Yeah.
working,
Yep.
but they get up really early. So now that they don't leave and go to daycare,
Mm.
they're up and it's kid time in the morning.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can say I've actually, my hours have shifted a little bit. I'm actually a little bit more of a night owl now than I was before, because of the kid dynamic, right? So, my wife's up early. She teaches ESL to kids in China, so she's up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's nighttime for them. So she's teaching class, and then when the kids get up, I'm like the late riser, but I'm doing work, at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and so I mean, it's actually kind of helped in a way because I think folks really, almost defined the workday as 9 to 5, for a long time. I think this is kind of diversified people's viewpoint of, when they're expecting a response, or when they feel like, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. They also feel like they can try and contact you whenever they want to.
You're home.
But yeah, go ahead.
You're home. You're always home now. That's your office. So technically, you're at the office. I can call you, right?
Yes. Yeah. Right. It's definitely a battle to try and keep those boundaries, but I mean, as a retail broker, when they call, they want to talk to someone, right? So, you try and set the extreme bounds, but then anything within that is pretty much fair play. So, all right, cool. So, let's kind of talk about the CPCU Society. So, uh, that's like the main thing that kind of brought you and I together, and brought the agents and brokers that are part of this program together. Um, what originally kind of made you get into getting your CPCU, and really kind of like inspired you to go down the designation route within the industry?
Well, that was actually the president of my old agency. I was definitely a detail person and got all those questions and everything like I was talking about. So they encouraged me to go and start designations. I actually started with CPCU instead of starting with any of the other ones.
Okay.
So went through that. It's been great. I feel like it as a retail broker, it did help me sell. Not only was it to people that actually knew what it was, a hallmark at the beginning that this guy, gets some credibility to start with, but it's also one of the things I really liked about CPCU is it takes kind of, I don't necessarily want to say the theory of things, but it explains kind of from the beginning through all the pieces of the industry, kind of why forms fit together the way they do in a bit of detail. So as things change, as you get in different situations, you can take that and apply the reasoning, the logic, the background, and understand just about any policy you work on, even if it's not ISO. You can understand why things do what they do. Whereas with some other programs that are out there, they tend to be very good, but very situational. So if you don't happen to find that situation, it's not nearly as helpful. So I feel like it gave a very broad base, which helps give confidence, helps as you're selling, it helps explain things much better to a customer. One of the tough things is not only is insurance very tough to understand, we have a lot of acronyms and all these things flying around, and sometimes they get put on quotes and stuff.
Right.
So a lot of times people never take a chance to explain things to customers. Sometimes you have to explain things pretending like they're an elementary kid, not because they don't understand it, but because there is so many complex things.
Yeah.
You have to really understand something to make it simple.
Awesome. Awesome.
I think
Yeah.
it very much helps in that way.
I think anyone who has a CPCU, there should be like a subline on their business card that says something like insurance educator. Because at the end of the day, like you said, you're the one getting like asked the questions about the crazy hypotheticals, and maybe even the garden variety day to day, like would this be covered, or what do we have to do in order to protect the client against this? That's a good point. All right, so you're not just a CPCU, you're a leader in the organization, right? You volunteer your time. What role or roles as a volunteer leader in the society do you currently have? And then what ultimately really kind of inspired you to, like, there's a little bit of like a dividing line there, right? Like there's getting the designation, which is the credentials and the eye chart on the business card, but then there's getting involved, getting your hands dirty in the organization and the society, and actually being active. So, what roles do you have, and what really kind of like compelled you to get engaged?
Sure. So what compelled me to get engaged is, just dealing with CPCs in my local area. I wanted to get involved for a while, but there wasn't really a great thing out there saying, "Hey, do this to get involved."
Mhm.
So at some of the normal meetings, I was actually sitting with one of the board members from my local chapter and said, I'd really like to get involved. I just haven't really had the time or known how. And they said, well, here's 3 different ways you can get involved. Which one of those do you want to do? Said, okay, well, yeah, that'll work. Let's do that. So then I was on my local board a little while after that. After kind of getting to know all the other board members, I got invited to be on the board. And since then, I've been vice president. I'm currently president of my chapter. I'm on the Agents and Brokers Committee for the interest group. And I'm on the annual meeting committee that helps set up, pick out speakers, and kind of get things going for the annual meeting, which hopefully we'll have. But, things are looking a little rough.
Yeah, you got your work cut out for you this year. I'll tell you that much. Just for everyone's edification, we're still a go as of right now for the annual meeting, right? As far as a physical meeting goes. And then what time frame is that again? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's early October. It's beginning of
Early
October,
October, right?
5th or 8th, I think is the start date.
Okay, Washington D.C. I love D.C. Nice for you. You're like right around the corner, huh?
Yeah, that's not too bad a trip. I'm thinking if it happens, it'll be a short train ride.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I made a comment to someone on one of the Facebook groups the other day. I'm running a session for the annual meeting. And I said, even if we don't have a physical meeting, I might just go to DC anyway and just live cast my session from like in front of the Lincoln Monument, just put some cones around myself so I have 6 feet of distance, and just bring a Wi-Fi hotspot or something. No, look, the annual meeting is something that I absolutely love. It's the in my opinion, it's the coming together of pretty much the highest concentration of super educated, motivated, knowledgeable insurance professionals and risk management professionals. One of the best collections of that group that gets together any year, and the people themselves are absolutely fantastic. So all right, so you're president of your chapter. You're a leader on the Agents and Brokers Interest Group. You're working on the annual meeting committee. Um, have those been positives in your career? Like, I mean, there's obviously you're building relationships and networking and things like that, and there's a huge value associated with that. But has the CPCU also helped you in terms of your career?
I'd say the designation itself has not been bad. I'd say the knowledge has been much better. Like I said, and the way I actually got involved where I am now is I was doing a presentation, which I kind of got into through teaching for CPCU, and then I also made some CE classes that I've taught for other organizations. So I was
Hmm.
putting one of those together and reached out to Nick Lamparelli, who's with the Insurance Nerds. He's the chief underwriting officer at reThought.
Hmm.
And the way I actually first contacted him was I was doing a section related to cat insurance. So because I had only done but so deep a dive on that, I wanted to get some better input from somebody who was really knowledgeable and reached out to him. And he took the time to talk to me. And then later, he had a question on some stuff that related to dealing with retail agents. He reached out to me, and we just kind of kept going from there. So
Awesome.
I'd say that kind of started down that path, and that's the kind of seed that led to what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I There's so many of those stories. Like not to minimize yours. I mean, yours is an important validation of what's possible. Uh, and I love the fact that you said like the letters are great, but it's really, the knowledge and then the connectivity that you get afterward that's actually able to, help you deploy it and add some value, right? As opposed to just kind of like collecting letters to collect letters. I think that's a fantastic take on it. But those stories are like they're so prevalent. It's like what's the Kevin Bacon game? It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever. Yeah. It's crazy the number of people that have like known someone who knew someone and that ended up kind of like sparking their career or helping them move somewhere else in the industry and kind of like make that next step up. Is There's so many of them. I love hearing about them. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So let's get a little bit more. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Before we move on, I just want to say, talking about networking and connections and everything, how I actually found out that Nick existed.
Yeah.
uh, because in looking at CPCU stuff, I found Insurance Nerds, and then found and was aware of Nick through that. So that actually knowing that he existed to start that also started through CPCU.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I would definitely anyone who's watching or listening to this, definitely check out the Insurance Nerds. They're on most social media platforms, so they're on YouTube if you look up Insurance Nerds. I believe the podcast is called Profiles in Risk.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just did a episode with Tony Kanyas on there regarding what the economy could look like in the future. There we did get a little slightly political, but I don't think you can get political without, or you can't talk economy without some level of public policy conversation. But anyone who is watching this, you should definitely check them out as well, especially if you're a young industry professional. But any industry professional is really going to get a lot of value out of there. All right, let's talk about a little bit more squishy topic. One of the things that we ask you is, have you ever visited somewhere like interesting or exotic? So what's been your kind of like favorite, not necessarily off the beaten path, but favorite place that you've visited kind of like outside of your home circle?
Well, so I did business administration in college, and I got to do a study abroad. So we kind of went across Europe, visiting different businesses, and
Oh, that's cool.
we did where the EU does their governing, and British Parliament and places like that. So I thought British Parliament was really pretty cool. The architecture's cool. We got to talk to one of the representatives and sit down with them for a while and tour that and find out a little more because I think we have a big tendency as Americans to see American news and whatever's here, which is usually a lot different than whatever's out there in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So it was definitely interesting from a lot of points of view, architecture, the politics of it, and just kind of, even while visiting there, seeing all the things that sort of were in our comfort zone and our circle, and it's what we see. And then when you go outside of that, in this case, outside the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
you see how things are a lot different and there are different perceptions out there.
Were they in session when you went? Like, did you get to see a session or?
There were a lot of members there. I can't remember if I don't think that I'm pretty sure they were not in session, but there were a lot of members. I think they had just finished.
Yeah, I think I would agree. Americans definitely have a I'll call it a polluted view of English Parliament. I think you know, the idea that I think it was who was it? It was I think the prime minister standing in front of parliament. One of the more recent videos that came out, and he was making some statements, and they're openly like booing him in parliament. And we have such a very kind of like I don't want to call it stuffy, but a very kind of regimented way that our legislature, kind of voices their opinions, and they all have their certain amount of time, and they have to cede the time to someone else. Um, and it's like a more strict version of parliament, which seems strange because everyone always thinks that like parliamentary procedure is the strictest of the strict, but I think a lot of people also think about parliament, and I don't know if you've ever seen like some of the SNL episodes where they had like mock English parliament, and everyone's acting basically like they're drunk, right? Like they've had two drinks before they walk in, and they're all yelling and screaming. But I think that's good. That's like so that broadened your perspective, I would imagine.
Yeah, that was my first time out of the country, so that was quite a trip for the first time.
That's ironic. I went to England. I've never been to London. I went to Cambridge, and I think London probably still has some of this feel too, even though it's metropolitan. Like you go to when I went to Cambridge, the feeling was there was just like a smell of history. I don't know what it was. It was like some of the buildings there are older than the United States, which just says something. I mean, some of the roads there are way older. Like some of the cobblestone roads are, hundreds and hundreds and maybe even 1,000 years old. So there's just like an aura to the place that is completely different than our country, where we kind of like prize new and things like that. We have some historic vestiges, but yeah, I digress. Anyone, I would implore anyone, if you go to England, definitely, or if you go to Europe, definitely try and at least stop off in England and kind of look at some of that stuff. So, all right, cool. So, in terms of like a parting message here, any agents and brokers that are out there that are maybe have gone partway through the designation process for the CPCU, or they're kind of like sitting on the sidelines. And they're like, I don't know, it's a big commitment. It's 8 tests, which by the way, the CPCU designation is now getting way more virtual as a result of the current situation. And we could talk all about that for a long time too. But what advice would you give to an agent or broker that's in one of those two positions where they haven't finished yet, and they kind of like need a little goose in order to get going, or if they're sitting on the sidelines and don't know whether or not they should get the CPCU? Is it worth it as an agent or broker, and what can they expect to get out of it?
It's absolutely worth it. The letters are good, the networking, the knowledge are better. And the biggest thing I'd say right now is you can't go places. It's the perfect time. Finish it.
That's a good
you,
point.
you can't go to a bar, you can't get a haircut. A lot of places still. Read
Yeah.
your CPC book.
Yes. Yeah. I put the Fortnite away, right? Like I only watch one episode of Tiger King at a time, okay? But fill in the gaps with the CPCU. And if you already have the CPCU, or maybe it just doesn't appeal to you, you have a couple other designations too, right?
Yeah, I have the ARM, the AIS, and the
Hold on. I got the list here.
CBI. CBI.
CBIA, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
That was a new.
that's a
What was the CBIA again? It was
that's a company specific one. It's a certified builders mutual insurance agent. CBIA, certified
okay.
builders insurance agent. So that's basically a 3-day, I think it was, like all day class on specifically construction, builders, liability, work comp, property, builders risk, all that stuff. So pretty
Awesome.
much a intensive construction insurance course.
That's a good point too. So like I think the ARM is fairly general too, more affixed to like risk management than kind of like pure insurance knowledge. I have the ARM as well. But the very niche certifications out there are fantastic, especially if that's what you're going to do on your day to day. And you touched on it earlier. The CPCU is more of a generalist understanding, and there's interconnectedness, right? There's policies in one area that may or may not respond, and there's also an interconnectedness with policies that come from another area of the industry or might be another piece of the insurance portfolio on a big one that could conflict or interact with that coverage. So I think the CPCU does a pretty good job of at least giving you a baseline knowledge of how that might work, right? You might not have the product specific knowledge, but it definitely helps you in terms of understanding the bigger picture. So, all right, cool. So, what does the future hold for you and or reThought? I mean, you guys are just kind of like plugging away, doing the same thing. Is there anything on the horizon for you guys?
We won't always be just flood. We're just flood right now. So where that goes, there are a couple of options. So we'll see where that goes. I'll keep that inside the organization for the moment. But where we're going is basically more capacity and better ability to work with agents how they want, the way they want, and as quick and as much as possible anytime they want. So that's kind of the next step is the whole front end piece
Yep.
and the capacity so that we can place all the stuff that'll come through that.
That's from my perspective, that's exciting. So I definitely appreciate that path that you guys are on. All right, cool. I want to say thank you very much, Derek, for joining us. You're a huge piece of the leadership team for the Agent and Broker Interest Group, and thank you for taking the time out today. I know you're just as busy as usual, if not more. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to talk.
Yep. And again, just a reminder to anyone watching, if you're watching this, please hit the subscribe button, like the video, share it if you're in any insurance professional groups, and hit the bell so that you can get notification when more of these come up. So appreciate it, and we're out.